What's up, guys? Bucky Dillon here, LibertyRevoltMedia.com, and today we're going to be talking about capitalism versus socialism, monetary policy, and other things that have to do with the economy. So if you care about money, I hope you guys stick around and hang out with us. I've got Brandon Work from Free State, Colorado, and as usual, my co-patriot, Cole Masters. I hope you guys enjoy the show. LibertyRevoltMedia.com. Epic intro, as per our usual arrangement. What's up, guys? How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Cole, how's China?
Oh, it's pretty cool, actually. Shanghai's a lot better than other cities, and it's just filled to the brim with foreigners. It's weird. It's weird being surrounded by foreigners in China. You guys, anyone who's been there will understand that most places you go here, you see like one foreigner a month, and you're like you're pointing at them like you're a caveman or something. So, yeah, it's cool.
And so are your Chinese counterparts. Every time they see you, oh, white guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And people want selfies with you, and they want to hand you their babies. They'll hand you their baby. That's a thing that's been happening lately. Is like they'll just give it to you, and you're like, what do I do now? What do you do with a baby, a random baby?
I gotta say, one of my favorite things about China was routinely walking down the street with my wife and child. Actually, I didn't have a kid at the time. I guess it was just my wife. And walking down the street with my wife and having Chinese women chase me down the street to ask me if I had a girlfriend.
when she's right there.
Yeah, I would always turn to my wife and be like, no girlfriend.
Oh,
so
God.
Brandon,
yeah, that's the kind of thing you get into.
Tell me about Free State, Colorado, and what you guys do. When you got started, all of it, the whole story.
Yeah, Bucky, definitely appreciate that. I'm a Colorado native, born and raised. Started working in the liberty movement here during the recall elections in 2013 against these evil gun-grabbing Democrats at the state capitol. Had some great success there. Got hired working for the National Association for Gun Rights. Very proud of that organization and the Second Amendment advocacy that they do. Much more hardcore than the NRA. And kind of get out of politics for a little while after working at the state capitol and working on some political campaigns. But everything that's happened this last year, the increasing tyranny we've seen, this pure evil in our midst, basically I had to get involved. I had to stand up, speak out, use my voice, use whatever knowledge I have of the political process to try and fight back against this evil and make us a little more free, make Colorado a free place to be. I think Colorado's got a lot going for it. It's my home, and I want to fight for freedom and do whatever I can to make us a freer place. So unfortunately, I don't post as much as I wish I could on the website. I have a very active Telegram channel, a couple associated with it, including Colorado Liberty Activists and Libertarian Media. So definitely check it out. I'm happy to share those links with you. But Free State Colorado is kind of the mothership and the hub. But the idea is to create a network of liberty activists across the state who want to fight for freedom, speak out, stand up, have their voices heard, and push back against this out of control authoritarianism that's almost impossible to believe.
So how did you personally get interested in political ideas, and then what made you become an activist?
Bucky, I think a lot of it had to do with conspiracy theories, actually. Back in middle school, online, got the internet. Internet was a newer thing back then. looking up weird stuff, ghosts and UFOs and whatever I can find. And then all of a sudden you start reading about, or I started reading about, you know, the JFK assassination, some of these other events in our history, and maybe that they didn't quite add up. It wasn't what my teachers in school taught me. And once you start understanding how much of what you've been taught is a lie, well, it really opens your mind up to what else is going on. You know, maybe we are in a slave society where we're just tax cattle for this ruling class trying to force us into their way of life. You know, maybe that's what's going on. And once you kind of go down that rabbit hole, take that red pill, however you want to call it, there's no going back, you know? And so then the ultimate question is, well, what do you do about it, right? What do? You have this knowledge, you understand that there's a slave system we exist within, this authoritarianism we've been lied to. Well, what do you do about it, right? And so I think one of the mechanisms is politics. That's where the action is, you know, fighting back. That's where the laws get passed.
Let me ask you something. I'm going to rattle off some conspiracies, and I want you to give me a one-word answer. You ready?
Okay.
Flat Earth.
What was it?
Flat Earth.
PSYOP.
Moon landing.
Faked.
Banking cartel.
Slavery.
JFK assassination.
Military industrial complex.
CIA.
Deep state.
Real.
JP Morgan, Rockefeller controlled Federal Reserve.
Slavery. I mean, the beginning of the whole economic system, which we find ourselves as nothing but tax cattle for the ruling class.
Okay. Oh gosh, what's a good one? Cole, name a conspiracy.
9/11.
Inside job.
2 words, but I'll take it.
One word stuff. One word stuff. There's a lot to say about all of these things you're mentioning.
All right, lizard people.
There it.
A metaphor.
UFOs.
Who knows?
All right, what's your favorite one? And I do want to get to the banking because that's one that's definitely close to me. And in the vein of what I wanted to talk about anyways.
Well, I think one of the most important one of the most important conspiracy theories out there is this idea that the politicians represent us, that they work for us, that they care about us. The truth of the matter is politicians only care about themselves and their career, maybe their friends if they have any, or at least their business partners, and they care about their bank account. But the politicians and the political class see most people as nothing but, you know, nothing but cattle to feed off of. So for people to think that these politicians they see on the news and national media care or give any type of consideration whether we live or die, that's the biggest conspiracy theory out there.
Really? You're spreading a lot of hate right now. What about Bernie Sanders?
What about Bernie? Weekend at Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Cares about you? You don't think he loves you?
You know, I have no idea, but I can tell you the primary goal of these politicians is to increase their own power, give themselves a leg up over everybody else, and to become wealthy. I mean, we could talk about Nancy Pelosi. I mean, here we go with economics, right? This idea that members of Congress are using their privileged information to make trading on Wall Street, make it profitable for them, to make millions and millions of dollars. I mean, you just have to look at the net worth of Congress people when they enter Congress, when they start going into Washington, D.C. versus where they're at now, where they're at after being in Congress for a couple of years. I mean, they're making a lot of money doing it. So I think they care a little more about that than about how little old Brandon's doing here in Colorado.
And have you guys seen
those are public servants you're talking about.
Bucky, have you seen the corruption coming out of the Federal Reserve now? The fact that a few Federal Reserve chairmen have themselves been making monetary policy that will directly affect their own personal investments. And the only thing that's happened to these guys is that they've been, it's like, And you haven't gotten any of this on mainstream news coverage whatsoever. I mean, that tells you all you need to know, is that the very people controlling the purse strings of the United States and what possibly could turn out to be one of the worst bubbles or recessions the world has ever seen are corrupt, are making these policies not for the people but for themselves. They've been caught, and it's just not showing up in the mainstream media. Nobody cares. Nobody cares to say a peep. I mean, if you want to talk about conspiracy theories, all you have to do is look at 2 videos on YouTube about this. I mean, this is news. This happened. There's no denying it at this point. So, you know, just the fact that people like to keep their mouths shut tells us really all we need to know about the connections.
Right. Well, the whole structure of the Federal Reserve seems corrupt to me. I mean, what we have is a monetary policy in which it doesn't matter if you have capitalism, it doesn't matter if you have socialism. No matter what, there's an elite few who control the money supply, and they can, at any time they want, inflate it and devalue the currency of everybody else, and then use that money to support whatever interests they're interested in supporting. And people seem to, you know, go out there and say that all of these failures we're seeing with people's financial lives are the direct result of late stage capitalism or whatever else. It's greedy CEOs. But you look at it and you're like, no, it's the fact that the value of your dollar is constantly being depleted by people who can sit on top of money printers or type digits into a computer and enrich themselves by transferring money from everybody else to themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's really insane that we have a monetary system where people can get away with this so flagrantly and blatantly. You'll never even hear a word about it in either an economics class, a political science class, or any sort of institutional explanation of why our system is the way it is. You'll hear funny things like quantitative easing, which, you know, 70% of the American population is not going to go past Googling quantitative easing, right? Or even go that far, because it sounds like this funny macroeconomics 305 term. It just means printing freaking money. Like, it's all lawyer speak, and that's exactly what they want it to be. They want it to be as complicated as possible, so we think it's a bunch of fancy math, when really it's not that fancy at all. It's just the fact of the matter is these people can print money whenever the hell they want, and it affects policy.
All right, so let me try to define quantitative easing. Oh, go ahead, Brandon.
I was just going to say, Cole hit the nail on the head there. A part of the way the political class gets away with doing what they do is by making things complicated and obfuscating what's actually going on, and put these funny names and technical terms and jargon to make it really hard for the average person. How can you have a representative government, a democratic type of government, where the people don't even know what the politicians, what the Federal Reserve, what the Treasury is doing, because it's so hard to understand. And I do believe a lot of that's intentional, because it protects them and allows them to get away with stuff. If it was simple, people wouldn't allow it.
Absolutely. And we've had a multitude of political leaders in the past, including Henry Ford, say that if the masses understood their monetary system, they would be in revolt. There would be a revolution tomorrow.
There'd be a liberty revolt.
There would be a liberty revolt. I'm going to
it really
pull something up here. Cole, go ahead.
I was going to say, it just really is insane the amount of work and depth you have to do to be, you know, dutifully informed on the political system, and that democracy is not just something simple and you can take for granted, and that it honestly takes work. Being a citizen and, you know, the art of citizenry in general takes work, and I think the more apathetic the population gets about this kind of stuff, the more we're going to see centralization of control, and the less we're going to see people who are actually able to make a democratic change.
Yeah, that's scary stuff, Cole. That's where it's going, though. Dumbing down the population, making it easier for them to be controlled, centralizing it. Just hit a button here to pay your taxes. We'll tell you how much you owe. You know, we'll tell you what to do, where to go, who to talk to. Just do what we tell you, and everything will be all right.
Oh, it's absolutely
All right, so
terrifying, and I see that here. I see that here in China all the time. Is the citizens here, even if something terrible happened, even if people say, "Oh, all it's going to take is for the CCP to stop making people rich and the people will rise up," no, that ain't going to happen. The apathy is way, way too widespread, and it's been that way for a long time. And you can see the results of it. And let me tell you guys, it ain't good. I need hours to explain just how freaking terrible policies like a one-party authoritarian state do to a rich population. But just know that when you get to this level, there ain't no going back.
it's interesting because it seems that over there the ideological conditioning is so extreme that it really doesn't matter what goes wrong. They're not going to blame the CCP. They're going to look outward, and I think they're preparing for that now. But given that our dear friend Cole Masters is out there all by his lonesome, perhaps perhaps we shouldn't dive too deeply into that subject.
Yeah, I don't think they're watching Facebook live streams, but you never know. All it takes is for someone to click the play button and use their facial recognition technology. Who knows? Maybe I'll find
All it
myself in
takes is
Xinjiang
for
for
them
a
to be
vacation.
suspicious of you and dig into your phone, and then they can follow everything else from there.
Well, it is a Huawei phone. I mean, they can already see everything I'm doing. Let's be real.
I shared the link to you on WeChat.
Here we go.
All right, so let's talk specifically. Well, I want to get into a defense of capitalism because obviously right now, particularly with young people, you see socialist rhetoric, democratic socialist rhetoric going all over the place. I personally have a childhood friend that I see posting some of the most ridiculous stuff straight off the economic left Facebook page, which if you guys want to see some just pinheaded polemic, go to the economic left Facebook page and look at the kind of stuff they're posting on there. Things that say anything that we see wrong and unsatisfying about people's lives today is therefore a result of failed capitalism, as if the system we have right now is representative of capitalism. So first, Brandon, let me ask you, do we have free market capitalism?
On a very limited scale. If you go to a flea market, a garage sale, if you and I decide to trade goods and pass money between each other, then yeah, as long as the government doesn't get involved, we have a little bit of a free market. However, the market's been so corrupted and so influenced by government policies that it's hard to call it free at all. I mean, the fact that prices are so distorted, these shortages we're seeing across the country, I mean, it's obvious, right? It's obvious to people when you see Biden take office and gas prices jump up, price of lumber jumps up. It's very obvious to people. It's hard. How can you even ignore it these days that government policy dictates so many of the consumer prices? It clearly dictates wages in regards to minimum wage laws, regulations about what businesses we can open or not. How the economy runs is so attacked by the government policies these days that no, we really do not have a free market. However, the seeds of a free market exist within every interaction between voluntary consenting individuals.
Well, it depends. Are you using a currency that's backed by nothing and being printed into existence infinitum? Because if you are, then I wouldn't say that's legitimate capitalism. If your currency is in many ways fraudulent and being manipulated, then it doesn't matter how much free trade you have if you have people who can just bring currency into existence at any point and devalue everybody else's.
That's true. It screws up our ability to plan for the future because the dollar is worth a dollar. Well, 10 years from now, is it going to be worth a nickel, a dime, a penny? Is it going to be worth anything? It's hard to plan. And when you distort the economy by influencing the money supply and controlling the money, then yeah, it makes it hard to plan for the future. It makes it hard to allocate resources and decide what's the best way to spend the money in society. It's a real problem that we're facing, and I think sound money is one of the goals in order to get our country back to become a free place once again. is to get, private competing currencies. That's something that Hayek talked about. But even just returning to a gold standard would do a lot to eliminate the power of the Federal Reserve, eliminate the power of the Treasury Department, the federal government, and give us more control over our own lives. I really do believe if we want to take our country back, we got to start by taking our paychecks back.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about taxation versus private spending. So I've been reading a book. It's called Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And this book, he tries to give you the shortest and most straightforward approach to understanding an economy and understanding how government spending acts in an economy, how free trade works, and all these different things, and some of the common economic fallacies. And in the very first chapter, what he begins by talking about is the most common economic fallacy that we have to deal with today is bad economists who look at only the immediate results of an economic policy on a targeted and very specific group of people, as opposed to the good economist, which looks at how an economic policy affects all people and in the long run, and how the good economist is inherently at a big disadvantage. And there's a lot of reasons why economics is plagued by so many fallacies that say mathematics or physics is not. And it's because you inherently have interest groups when you're talking about money. Obviously, everybody wants more money for themselves or whatever group they're advocating for. And people will pay tremendous amounts of money to get people to lobby or advocate for economic policies that help them. And so whereas as in mathematics, when someone discovers, the Pythagorean theorem, it benefits all of mathematics, and there's not really a subgroup of people who are like, no, we got to bury this. This is terrible. The fake news, misinformation, right? In some industries, and not all scientific industries are pure, right? Obviously, climate change and COVID and a bunch of other scientific industries have groups that they're catering to, but economics probably dwarfs any of the perversions of those industries just because money is directly involved and people obviously want to get more money for themselves. And it's also a disadvantage for the good economist because it is difficult to explain and get people to follow looking at the entire economy and how it affects all people in the long run. It's much easier to say, well, this policy is going to benefit these disadvantaged people today, right? So it's a much easier sell. You don't have to get the common person who isn't necessarily interested in these ideas to go into this lengthy explanation about how, well, by taking from this group and giving to this group, you're artificially subsidizing an industry that's less efficient or whatever else. It's hard to get people to grasp some of these concepts.
Definitely. Life is complicated, and the socialists, the communists, the people who want to use the printing press for their advantage try and make things simple. They try and say, well, hey, let's just increase somebody's wages and give them more money. We'll make them wealthy by doing that. Well, they're not seeing the bigger picture. Like you said, Hazlitt says, well, look who's paying for that, right? What is that business owner now going to go without because he has to pay his employee that much more? Is it worth even what they're doing? It's so arbitrary when the government decides to set prices and get involved. And yeah, it can definitely stimulate certain industries and specific individuals. And, those closest to the printing press benefit the most. There's a lot of talk since the 1980s about trickle down economics. And, there's a lot to talk about with that. But I think the biggest takeaway for me, at least, is that, yeah, not a lot trickles down if you're really close to the politically connected who are getting the money first. You get the money first, and then by the time it trickles down to the rest of society, well, guess what? That money supply has been inflated. There's a lot more of it out there. Goods are devalued. So the money you're getting, if you get it first, you're a lot better off. It's worth a lot more than if you get it later on down the line. So yeah, to talk about the corruption, I mean, that's a huge component of it, is people want to get that money and they want to get it quick, and they spin the narrative to say, well, hey, look, we created all these new jobs in this community by taking money from all these other states, pumping it into my district, and here we go, look how great we're doing. but not talking about how much poverty was created by taking money out of those other communities. So you got to look at the big picture 100%. And that's something that, like you said, schools don't teach that. Schools really don't maybe want us to know. To get to Cole's point, they want us to just be a happy little do as you're told type of people.
And it's interesting because, and this is one of my biggest complaints about the two-party system, and why I would do anything to establish an electoral system in which alternative parties could get a step in, or people could just vote for who they liked. And politicians weren't, A party, B party, running on demagoguery and grievance peddling and castigating anyone who votes for the other person as just the worst of all potential evils, which is what we have. Because what ends up happening is now you have a political structure that incentivizes people to do whatever they can to disenfranchise the other constituency to benefit their constituency. And I think this is a big part of what's going on with the vaccine mandates, right? I don't think it's about health. I think number one, it's about money for big pharma, but I've gone into that before. And I think number two, it's a way for one party to deal a tremendous blow to the economic backbone of anyone who disagrees with them. If they can get all of their political opponents' constituencies fired from their jobs, and they can pack all of these major industries with people who agree with them, well, that's going to have tremendous long-term economic effects. And I think they do it knowing full well that it's going to benefit them. If they can get anyone who disagrees with them fired from their job, particularly in the biggest companies, they're going to have a tremendous economic advantage when it comes to campaign finance or advocacy.
Yeah, and that speaks volumes to something that happens all the time, which is regulatory capture, basically where, government agencies are entirely captured by private interests. And we've seen this in the financial sector. We've seen this in the environmental protection sector. We've seen this in many places where the revolving door between government and private industry, it's always going around. And I mean, just the fact that you can make these policies, put down a mandate in favor of big pharma and then go get a job as a representative or lobbyist for big pharma once you've left the government. It goes to show where the incentives really lie. And I mean, this is the sort of corporatism I think that leftists are pushing back against without knowing what they're pushing back against. And that's the thing. They're just like, oh, we just need to give everyone money. And they don't talk about the fact that, these big money interests are in there getting a job after they put in. They're weaponizing regulations in a way that gets them a job with the company that it benefits right afterwards. And I think, once again, we're going to see that with these mandates in big pharma. And now everybody's simping for big pharma, which is amazing. Right. You would never imagine this would be the case. Like, come on, guys.
I know.
Right,
I know
radical leftist.
Yeah, and I hearken back. I wish we could have the days where leftists were actual anarchists who hated the state just as much as they hated capitalism. But these days it's mostly just some dude with an anime weeb picture on Twitter saying we need to give all our money to the government. Trump is a fascist. Crying into his freaking mushroom soup. God.
Yeah, it's it's interesting to me. I saw a meme from Dave Smith recently where he was pointing out that the wokery came right on the heels of the We Are the 99% movement.
Right. Occupy Wall Street. We are the 99%. These leftists who don't speak out, who think that corporations should be able to do whatever they want as long as they got the government working with them. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. It's very, very strange times we're in, that's for sure.
Right. And people think that, okay, we have a problem with this industry. operating in a way that is corrupt or inefficient. Oh, I know what we should do. Let's introduce more government intervention, because big business doesn't lobby the government to regulate their competitors out of the market ever. They would never do that. It seems as though almost every time the government regulates an industry, it helps establish a government enforced monopoly in that industry. And look at the two industries that our friends on the left complain about the most: healthcare and education. There are no industries outside of healthcare, education, big pharma that the government hasn't gotten the most involved with and regulated the most. And that's primarily the reason why they're so corrupt and inefficient and expensive.
Right, right. I mean, that's why we have such great food, such great beer, such great liquor. I mean, you can go to the store. I mean, that's what the young people need to realize, those advocates of socialism. Capitalism gets you everything you have. You know what I mean? The reason you're so wealthy, the reason you got a million channels to watch on YouTube or on TV, the reason you got a smartphone, the reason you got unlimited choices for food and entertainment is because of capitalism. It's in spite of the government regulation, not because of the government regulation. And the sooner people realize that all your nice, fun things, all your toys are going to disappear, the more socialist we become, the faster they realize that, the better off we'll be, for sure. You know, your video games, kids, they're not going to be there if you don't have a free market capitalist system, because the state's going to make only what they want. And I can tell you that's not going to be good.
Okay, so let's define capitalism. Cole?
Oh, geez. Okay. So I would say capitalism is an economic system in which the free exchange of goods is privileged as the value to which we push toward our government, our laws, and the way that we try to regulate ourselves within economic transactions between individuals. As in, capitalism is the extreme of economic systems in which government deregulation as seen is the ultimate end for facilitating trade between individuals who want to take part in that trade.
Brandon, can you summarize that in English, please?
It's complicated.
That was pretty
Sorry.
good. No, that's pretty good, Cole. Pretty good. I would say just in a simpler way to say it in my mind, or at least how I understand it, is to say it's the private ownership of everything. You privately own everything. The means of production are privately owned. Individuals, which, you know, if you see Austrian economics, what libertarianism really talks about is the individual is really the core. Individual is all that exists, right? Groups exist only in the abstract. But an individual, you let them own things, you let them make their own decisions. They're going to do what they can to benefit themselves. And the way they're going to make money is by benefiting other people in their community. And capitalism rewards people who are meeting the needs of other people. You know, it's really just about the private ownership of the means of production, private ownership of everything in society. And the closer we get to the private ownership of everything, I think the better off we're going to be.
So I would define capitalism as a economic, and again, I have to say that our capitalism today is tainted and perverted and thwarted by the fact that our currency can just be easily manipulated by the wealthy elite. And that kind of undoes a lot of the good that capitalism can bring. But capitalism is a trading system in which the government does not get involved, because it's based on the core principles of self-ownership and private property, which is you own your own labor. Nobody else does, not Congress, not the federal government. You own your own property, not Congress, not the federal government. And in a free market capitalist system, I would get rich not by pointing the gun at somebody else to say, hey, we're going to redistribute that guy's wealth to me, but instead by serving the needs of the masses. It is the only system in which you can get rich by serving others, right? By engaging in altruism. People complain about, well, look at how much money Elon Musk has. It's not fair that Elon Musk has all these billions of dollars, and yet there are people who are sleeping on the street. So I actually kind of made a moral case, right? Who is more moral and who has contributed more of a fair share to society? Bernie Sanders or Elon Musk? And I went through the lives of Bernie Sanders and Elon Musk. Turns out Bernie, other than for like less than a year when he was in college. He worked for somebody else as a carpenter for a few months. Outside of that, he has spent his entire life living off of the profit of others, literally just living off of taxpayer money that was forcefully confiscated by the government or on welfare programs. He has never created a job outside of his political campaigns, in which he caught a bunch of heat for paying his own campaign staffers less than the $15 minimum wage he was going around bragging about. So his campaign staffers were setting up all of his events, and then he would get on stage and talk about how necessary a $15 an hour living wage is, and then paying them like $8 an hour. And then I compared that with Elon Musk, who currently employs like 120,000 people worldwide and has revolutionized industry after industry after industry throughout the course of his life. By the time he was 12 years old, he created a video game and sold it. Then he created is it PayPal? Let me think. I think he created PayPal.
Yeah, it's PayPal.
Yeah,
He did create
Elon
PayPal.
Musk
Him and Peter Thiel
PayPal,
created PayPal,
which completely revolutionized how people would engage in online financial transactions. And then he invented an electric car that could outperform any other vehicle on the road by a lot. And then he invented rockets that could shoot up into space and then come back down to Earth and land and be reshot into space. And then he figured out how to put his car on a rocket and launch that thing into space. I mean, the contributions that Elon Musk has made to society benefit everyone. Bernie Sanders has never employed a person in his life that wasn't paid off of other people's money. He's never revolutionized anything. He's been a professional leech his entire life.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about people who can innovate entire industries in this way. And I do understand the alternate argument of when you have sort of revolving door CEOs who make 150 times more than, you know, their whatever paid employee, and they don't contribute much, because it's true that a lot of CEOs are just as much of leeches as are people in Congress. And I just think that an efficient system of capitalism would also weed those people out. So the way that we have it, the way that regulations are set up, also favor the people in companies who don't do a damn thing.
Right, because if those industries were deregulated and their competition could get off the ground and actually compete, these companies where their CEOs weren't strategically thinking about how to solve problems and revolutionize industries would be out competed by entrepreneurs who were, right? And this ability to redistribute wealth, right? The government only gets money one out of two ways. It either taxes people, which, by the way, at the other end of every tax, every law, every regulation, every fee is state-sponsored gun violence. It's all one-sided political means to wealth, confiscation by gunpoint. And if you don't believe it's by gunpoint, well, try not paying it. And then when they come to take your assets from you, physically try to stop them and see what happens. On the other side, you have people who engage in the free market who go out there, they solve other people's problems. There's one group that you hear the left always leave out when they're talking about minimum wage laws or these companies and the difference in pay between the CEOs and the people that work for the company. They always seem to leave out how the company made their money. They gave people what they wanted, and people voluntarily went to that company and purchased their product, right? They always leave out the customer. They always leave out the masses of people who support those businesses. Why is Jeff Bezos rich? Why is Elon Musk rich? Why is Jeff Zuckerberg rich? Because everybody is using Amazon and everybody is on Facebook. Why is Walmart rich? Because you can't go to Walmart even at 1 a.m. and not see 70 people.
They're serving the needs of the community, that's for sure. And I think Cole brought up a great point, and it kind of relates to your point earlier, Bucky. Like, you know, capitalism can be considered a little cutthroat, and I think that's some of the appeal to the left, especially these younger people. They want things to be fair, right? We have a whole generation of men who've been coddled, who get participation trophies, who think that things should be fair and soft, and you shouldn't have to struggle in life. Well, capitalism's kind of the opposite of that, and I might be conflating free markets with capitalism, but they kind of go hand in hand. The idea is, on the free market, you completely are responsible for your own success and your own failure. And a lot of people don't want to deal with that, because we have seen just this prolonged adolescence in people where there's a lack of entrepreneurial spirit among them. And I think it's particularly people on the left, people who just want to hand out, who want to be fed, their whole lives and taken care of, and they're guaranteed housing, they're guaranteed food, they're guaranteed their little games they play every day. Where the capitalist mindset, the free market mindset, is about getting out there. It's about struggling. It's about working your butt off, your ass off, to make a difference in your community and improve the quality of other people's lives, and you get rewarded for that. I mean, it's amazing. Capitalism, free market sort of move civilization forward. Socialism, wealth redistribution, the welfare state, so all of that moves civilization backwards, because all of a sudden you're changing the incentives. In socialism, you're not rewarding people for working hard. You're not rewarding people for providing a service to the community. That's what capitalism and free markets do. They reward people who make the world a better place. And, as hard as that is for some people to accomplish, that's the way it's got to be. And maybe there's a little bit of survival of the fittest, some social Darwinism involved. And I get it. I get it to all you leftist people out there. It's scary, but hey, this is how we move forward. You got to struggle if you want to succeed. You're not getting to the top of the mountain unless you climb.
Right. Well, and there's a reason why innovation comes from free market capitalism economies and almost never comes from a socialist economy. Like we said, in a capitalist economy, you get rich by solving other people's problems and giving them what they want. In a socialist economy, you get rich by lobbying the government to redistribute wealth to you. In a socialist economy, the economy is run at the point of a gun to force wealth from one person to another person. And like you said earlier, they don't do it thinking about what is going to provide the next breakthrough innovation, right? There's a reason why in the United States, we've come out with the vast majority of all medical innovations that exist in the world today, whether it's prosthetic limbs or artificial hearts or X-rays or MRI machines or CAT scans. I mean, almost all of it came from the United States. And I may be wrong on some of those lists, but I know it's somewhere in between like 30 and 50% of all the medical innovations come exclusively out of the United States. And I think that number has started to dwindle in the last couple of generations, the last couple of decades, but it still holds true. And the reason why other countries can have a socialist healthcare system that moderately works is because the United States is defending their countries from the aggression of their neighbors, and B, coming out with all of the innovations that they then get to go utilize. For example, there's price controls on pharmaceutical drugs in Canada. That's part of the reason why our drugs are so expensive, because the pharmaceutical companies aren't making enough money in Canada to reinvest into research and development. And so they're raising their prices on pharmaceutical drugs here to do that. And so Canada is benefiting from all of the research and development that we are paying for.
Right. And it's interesting, especially in the domain of healthcare, because this is obviously going to be a touchy issue for many, many people in this case. And honestly, if we did have more free market capitalism in a way, even if there were healthcare innovations, then these healthcare companies that can jack up the prices, 500 times what they paid with research and development would not necessarily be protected from the competition of other people almost reverse engineering their drugs and find a better way to make a more same vein for a cheaper price. I think what people don't realize is that if you open the market up in things like pharmaceuticals and patent laws, more going to see competition where there is not competition right now, because obviously I'm not get rid of all patents.
I think we're losing
Cole. It could deregulate that a little bit. Uh-oh.
I think we're losing Cole.
Uh-oh.
Brandon, did you hear any of that?
I heard some of it, and I think some of what Cole's talking about, what I heard of it, I 100% agree with completely. It's all about the government capture, government regulations. I mean, why is healthcare so expensive, right? It's because these pharmaceuticals or these big businesses, these big healthcare businesses have control of the market. The government has handed them the market and said, hey, you get to do what you want. You set your prices. You know, here's the policies you need to follow. We're going to create licensing laws to prevent competition. We're going to shape the market to limit competition, to give you all the benefit of this necessary product and service that people need in the world. And it's criminal. I mean, it really, you know, there's a strong argument being made on the left about healthcare, but they got to realize the government has created the problem. The government has created the healthcare issue. Why they've created the problem of why things are so expensive. If the free market, as Cole was saying, the free market was allowed to exist in healthcare, prices would go down, quality would go up, services would increase, and there'd be more opportunity for people to find affordable options. 100%.
You know, I try to explain it to people in a illustration, a metaphor. Let's say you went to a restaurant, the only restaurant legally permitted to operate, and you sit down at the table, and the waiter comes over to you and he says, "Don't worry, your meal is free. All those other tables are going to pay for it," right? And then he hands you a menu. You take a look at the menu and you realize that there's no price indicated next to any of the food or drinks, and you wonder why that is. So you go ahead and you ask the waiter, "Hey, why is there no price next to the steak?" He says, "Don't worry about it. It's free." Right? So you're like, okay, great. Well, that guy's not going to hold back. That guy's not going to hold back. I certainly ain't going to hold back. I would like the steak. I would like the lobster. I would like the Rothschild wine. I would like the cheesecake. Can you bring an extra side of bacon wrapped asparagus? Oh, I don't want just a steak. I want the filet mignon wrapped in bacon, medium rare, with a little strip of rosemary on top. All of it. Go all out, right? And the waiter's going to say, "That's a great idea. You want a few more? Yeah, how about some breadsticks?" You're like, "Oh, yeah, bring some breadsticks, my man." Goes back to the kitchen, brings you this elegant meal. You eat half of it. You don't really need the rest, right? You just ordered whatever you want. There's no cost to it. Eventually, that bill comes due. They're going to come to your table and they're going to place a bill on everyone's table, and you're going to be like, "Well, I thought that guy was paying for it." "Well, you know, I thought that guy was paying for it." Does this in any way incentivize them to lower the price? Of course not. Why would they lower the price? Their money is guaranteed because they're going to split the bill between everyone. And even if everyone at the table in every table in the whole restaurant doesn't have enough money, well, they're going to turn to the government and say, "Hey, we're going under. You're going to have to inflate the currency and pay for this," and they will, which is an indirect tax on everyone. It's even more nefarious than direct taxes, if you ask me. Does this encourage the people going into the restaurant to order sparingly, order only what they need? Absolutely not. In no way is that going to make things more efficient. In no way is that going to make things cheaper, right? When you eliminate all competition and you take away all of the risks to them overselling you or underperforming you or overperforming for you, when you eliminate any of the reasons why someone might be sparingly with what they decide to order, what do you expect is going to happen? You're going to have business that is inefficient, more expensive, and an unsustainable financial situation to where the government is constantly inflating the currency to cover this deficit.
100%. You got it. 100%. I like to say economics in one sentence. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody's paying for it somewhere. You think it's free? I want free healthcare, free food, free whatever. Well, somebody's paying for it. It was a result of somebody's labor, somebody's work, somebody's investment that provided that thing. So understand there's no such thing as a free lunch. If that was taught in schools, we'd avoid half the problems that we face in politics, especially when it comes to economic policy, for sure. And Bucky, you bring up a great point. Prices are signifying information. Prices are an important market mechanism because they signify value. They signify scarcity. They signify how time preference works in terms of, hey, I want something immediately versus I'm willing to wait for something. Prices determine a lot. Prices tell entrepreneurs what's worth doing. If you find out that all of a sudden this good that's cheap in your community is really expensive over there, and you can supply this good to those people over there, well, hey, you can make a profit. But you need prices to be able to tell you that. The government comes in and manipulates prices, whether it's the price of rent, the price of labor, the price of goods in terms of like anti-gouging laws. All they're doing is disincentivizing entrepreneurs by taking away their knowledge of how the market is working and how the market is operating. It's harder for them to understand what people really want, and it's harder for people to see, well, hey, here's an opportunity to make some money. So if we just got the government out of the whole pricing system in terms of healthcare, in terms of restaurants, in terms of any of it, you know, we'd have a lot more options and a lot more freedom, and we'd all be better off for sure.
Right, especially because, I mean, there is no bureaucrat that can determine the price of something better than the
Right.
producer of that product, right? And here's a perfect example, right? Say you put price controls on red meat, right? All beef products. Well, what does that do? That changes the value of a cow, which changes the value of leather, which changes the value of wheat, right? I mean, which the cow has all these other industries around it that are affected by the value of the cow, right? The cow is responsible for leather, which is responsible for baseball mitts, which is responsible for baseball gloves, which is responsible for upholstery in your car. By price fixing one aspect of the economy, you end up affecting and artificially manipulating the prices of a whole bunch of other things that are simply going to raise in price to accommodate, right? The government cannot artificially change the value of something without artificially changing the value of a whole bunch of other things up and downstream of that thing. And it can't fund anything without first taking that money away from something else. The government only solves problems in one of two ways. It either throws other people's money at the problem, or it throws bullets at the problem. That's it. That's the only way the government solves problems.
It's true. It's very, very true. Yeah, 100%. You got it, man. I mean, distortions, market distortions. You start manipulating prices, you're manipulating the information in the market, you're changing what things are worth. The government, the idea, I mean, that's why the Soviet Union fell. I mean, let's be real here. That's why socialism fails. It's called the calculation problem. You know, you can't calculate what's worth what. What's worth your time? Should you make 1,000 pianos in your factory, or should you make 1,000 firearms? You know what I mean? How do you know those things? Well, you know, because the market tells you so, because the consumer tells you so. Prices are a reflection of the market, of the consumer's wants and desires, and the value of something in society. So you got it 100%. I mean, economics in one lesson, like you said, if that was taught in schools, if everybody read that, I mean, we'd be in a much better place as a society completely.
Right on. Well, hey, thanks for hanging out, man. I'll let you go. I hope to see you next Saturday night for a little libertarian hangout. I think Kevin's going to start one too.
Right on.
Yeah,
awesome.
He's doing Larry.
Yeah, look forward to it. Great.
Right
That's
on.
awesome.
Jeff, I hope you attend, and anybody else who's watching. But I hope you guys have a great night. It's been about an hour. Brandon, I will see you Wednesday for lunch, right?
Sounds good, man. Looking forward to it, Bucky.
Awesome. And Saturday on the radio show.
Perfect. Sounds good.
All right. I'll see you then.
All right. Take care.
Have a good night, everybody.